Did you know that one of the most strategic assassinations in history is recorded in the Bible? The story of Ehud. The assassin, chosen by God, reveals a coup that toppled the most feared king of his time and changed the destiny of an entire nation. We are talking about an ordinary man from the tribe of Benjamin who used a seemingly insignificant detail to become one of the greatest liberators of Israel. While the people groaned under the brutal oppression of Moab, God was preparing a secret plan, a hidden sword, a locked room, and a precise blow that no one expected. But here is the question that has endured through the centuries. How was a left-handed man, considered defective in his time, chosen by God to carry out such an impossible mission? And what does this assassination in the Bible teach us about divine justice, courage, and purpose? Stay until the end, because I'm going to reveal a surprising detail about this biblical story of courage that few people realize, something that can completely transform how you see God's plans for your own life. This is the story of Ehud and Eglon. This is the story of the coup against King Eglon, and this may be the story that will make you understand that God uses precisely what the world discards. Shall we begin? Imagine waking up every day in fear. Fear of losing your family, fear of not having food, fear of a king who knows no mercy. This is exactly how Israel lived under Moabite rule. 18 years. 18 long years of humiliation, heavy tributes, and constant terror. The book of Judges, chapter 3, tells us that the people had turned away from God, and as a consequence, they were delivered into the hands of King Eglon, the most feared man of the time. Eglon was not just a powerful king, he was a symbol of brutal oppression. Moab in the Bible represents that seemingly invincible enemy, that situation that drags on for so long that you begin to believe it will never change. Children grew up without knowing freedom. The elderly died without seeing hope. Israel was broken. There was no army, there was no military strategy, there was no visible leader, only the unbearable weight of slavery and the distant memory of a God who had once delivered them from Egypt. Did he still care? Was there any chance of liberation? But here is the pattern that runs throughout the biblical story. When the people cry out, when the pain becomes unbearable, when it seems there is no way out, that is precisely when God begins to move the pieces on the board. And this time, he would choose the most unlikely player you could imagine. The question remains, can you see God's hand at work even when all seems lost? From the tribe of Benjamin came a man named Ehud, son of Gera, a name that does not appear in lists of famous warriors, a man who did not hold the title of general, did not command armies, and had no reputation as a hero. In fact, if you were looking for someone to lead an impossible mission, Ehud would easily be overlooked. He was just another Israelite trying to survive under Moabite oppression. But the Bible teaches us something fundamental. God does not choose as man chooses. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. The scorching midday sun beats down on the hills of Benjamin. Ehud is alone, kneeling in secret prayer. His face is marked by the suffering of years of oppression, but his eyes burn with something different. It is not blind hatred, it is determination. It is faith. It is the deep conviction that God has not abandoned his people. Around him, the heavy silence is broken only by the warm wind that carries the scent of dry earth. His calloused hands clench into fists. He knows, somehow he knows he has been called to something greater, something dangerous, something that will demand everything from him. When Ehud finally gets up, there is a resolve in his expression that wasn't there before. He doesn't know all the details yet, but he knows enough. God is about to use an ordinary man to accomplish the extraordinary. But here's what makes Ehud one of the unlikely heroes of the Bible. He had a characteristic that, to the world of that time, was seen as a weakness, a limitation, a flaw. And that would be precisely the key to the whole operation. Why would God choose someone with that particular disadvantage? This answer will change everything. The Bible makes a point of recording something specific about Ehud. He was left-handed. In Hebrew, the literal expression is restricted to the right hand. That is, he primarily used his left hand. Today, this may not seem like a big deal, but back then, being left-handed was seen as unusual, even disadvantageous. Most people were right-handed. Weapons were made for right-handed people. Society functioned for right-handed people. Ehud was different, and that difference made him invisible to the gods. Think about it. When Moabite soldiers searched someone, they checked the left side of the body where a right-handed man would normally carry his sword. It was standard procedure. It was the military logic of the time. Nobody thought to check the right side because nobody expected someone to carry a weapon there. Ehud, being a left-handed man, was not a limitation. It was a strategic advantage that God had already prepared from birth. What the world saw as weakness, God would transform into strength. What seemed like an obstacle would be the key to the most audacious plan of liberation. How many times do we look at our own limitations and feel unqualified? How many times do we think that what makes us different makes us less capable? The story of Ehud in the Bible radically challenges this mindset. God doesn't just use our differences, He transforms them into secret weapons. But for this advantage to work, Ehud needed something more, something no one could detect, something deadly, and he was about to forge exactly that. Ehud didn't just go to the nearest gun shop and buy any old sword. No, he designed and commissioned a weapon specifically for this mission, a custom-made weapon, a lethal weapon. The Bible says it was about a cubit long, approximately 45 centimeters, short enough to be hidden, long enough to be deadly. It had two sharp edges. It was not a ceremonial dagger. It was a war blade made for a single purpose, to pierce through flesh and bone without fail. And here's the brilliant detail. Ehud tied this sword to the right side of his thigh, under his clothes. While any right-handed man would be searched on the left side, he would go unnoticed. The weapon was there, hidden, waiting for the right moment. Ehud and the hidden sword became one. He didn't act on impulse. He planned, he prepared, he prayed. Every detail was thought out with surgical precision. This was a secret mission from God, and Ehud was willing to risk everything. His life, his reputation, his family, everything. And since we're talking about total commitment, allow me to extend a quick invitation. If this story is impacting you, if you want to continue discovering little-known biblical characters who changed history, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps me continue bringing you this profound content. Let's move forward. With his sword drawn and his plan mapped out, Ehud was one step away from entering the lion's den. But how could he get close to the most feared king of the time without arousing suspicion? The answer lay in something Israel had been doing for years, paying tribute. Ehud presented himself as the bearer of the tribute, gold, silver, produce of the land, all that Israel was forced to deliver year after year as a symbol of its submission. For the Moabites, it was just another routine delivery. For Ehud, it was the strategic entry into the enemy's palace. King Eglon was in his summer palace in Jericho, the city of palm trees. The Bible describes Eglon as a very fat man. Not just a physical description, but a symbol of his greed, his excess, his arrogance. He had grown fat at the expense of Israel's suffering. While the people starved, he feasted. Ehud approached with the tribute. He made the delivery. He bowed. He perfectly played the role of a submissive subject. The guards suspected nothing. He passed through the inspection without any problems. The sword on his right side remained invisible, exactly as planned. But then Ehud did something unexpected. After delivering the tribute and starting to leave with the other bearers, he returned, alone. And he said to the king, "I have a secret message for you, O king, a message from God." Intrigued and arrogant, Eglon imagined it to be some revelation that would further increase his power, perhaps a favorable prophecy, perhaps information about some rebellion. He had no idea that the message from God would be executed with a steel blade. The king ordered everyone to leave. He wanted privacy to hear this secret word. And with that, unknowingly, Eglon had just sealed his own fate. The door closed, and inside that room, there was only an arrogant king and a liberator chosen by God. What would happen there would change the course of history, but before the coup, there was silence. The sound of the door being locked from the inside echoed through the room. Outside, the guards took their positions, unconcerned. Inside, two men. One sat confidently, waiting to hear secrets. The other stood, his hand near his right thigh, knowing that the next few seconds would decide everything. The silence was heavy, almost oppressive. Eglon awaited a word. Ehud knew that the word of God, at that moment, would be carried out not with sound, but with action. Can you imagine what was going through Ehud's mind? His heart racing, the adrenaline pumping, the absolute certainty that there was no turning back. If anything went wrong, he would be killed immediately, tortured. His family could suffer retaliation. Israel would lose its only chance. But Ehud was not there out of his own courage. He was there because God had chosen him. He was there because 18 years of oppression were enough. He was there because divine justice in the Old Testament was not merely a theological concept. It was a concrete reality, executed through men and women willing to obey, even when the price was extremely high. Eglon broke the silence. What's the message? His words came out with the arrogance typical of someone who has never been challenged, of someone who never imagined they could be vulnerable. Ehud stepped forward. His left hand moved swiftly to his right thigh. His fingers touched the hilt of his sword, and then he spoke the only words recorded in the Bible from this moment. I have a message from God for you. And with that, everything changed. In a swift and precise movement, Ehud drew his sword and plunged it into Eglon's belly. The blade went in so deeply that even the hilt disappeared into the flesh. The Bible records it in graphic detail. The sword went all the way through, and the fat closed over the blade. It was quick, it was definitive, it was silent. The most feared king of the time, the one who oppressed Israel for 18 years, the one who considered himself invincible, fell without even being able to cry out for help. The assassination of Eglon was not merely an act of violence, it was an act of divine justice. It was the fulfillment of a plan that began long before that day. Ehud did not hesitate. There was no room for doubt. He had been chosen by God for this specific moment, and now the hardest part was not the blow, it was the escape. Eglon's body lay fallen, the sword remained buried, and Ehud needed to get out of that room, past the guards, leave the palace, and reach Israel before the alarm sounded. It seemed impossible. But remember, this was the same God who parted the Red Sea, the same God who brought down the walls of Jericho. And now he was guiding Ehud step by step. But how did you escape a palace full of Moabite soldiers after assassinating the king? The answer lay in something as simple as it was ingenious. Ehud locked the doors of the room from the inside and went out through a side passage, probably a service exit used by the servants. He locked the doors behind him. Outside, the guards waited, but since the king had requested privacy, they dared not interrupt. Ehud walked calmly through the corridors. He didn't run. He didn't show any desperation. He acted like someone who had simply completed his task and was leaving. And it worked. He passed the guards, crossed the palace, and left. Meanwhile, outside the locked room, the guards began to worry. The king was taking too long, but the Bible records an almost comical detail. They thought Eglon was in the bathroom. Literally, covering his feet was a euphemism of the time for physiological needs. They waited and waited. The longer it took, the further Ehud distanced himself from danger. When the guards finally decided to break down the door and found the king dead, it was too late. Ehud was far away, and the panic that gripped the Moabite palace was only the beginning. This was one of the most improbable escapes in biblical history. There were no visible miracles like clouds of fire or parting seas, but there was something equally powerful: the perfect fulfillment of a divine plan executed by an obedient man. Ehud didn't stop until he reached the mountains of Ephraim, and there he would do something that would transform his secret mission into a national revolution. When Ehud arrived in the mountains of Ephraim, he did not whisper the news. He did not try to keep it a secret. He sounded the trumpet. The sound echoed through the valleys and hills, summoning the children of Israel. And when the people gathered, Ehud proclaimed, "Follow me, for the Lord has delivered the Moabites, your enemies, into your hands." It was a call to war, but not just any war. It was a war of liberation. 18 years of oppression were about to end. The king was dead. The Moabite leadership was in chaos. It was time to act. And here is something powerful. Ehud didn't just execute a secret plan and disappear into history. He led, he inspired. He transformed an individual act of courage into a collective movement of liberation. He became one of the great liberators of Israel. The people responded. Men who had lived in fear now took up arms. Fathers who had taught their sons to bow down before Moab now taught them to fight for freedom. Hope, which had seemed dead, was resurrected with full force. Ehud led Israel to the Jordan River, and they seized the fords, the crossing points. It was a brilliant military strategy to cut off the escape route and the way for Moabite reinforcements. No one could cross. The Moabites were trapped in Israelite territory, and then came the confrontation, the battle that would decide whether Israel would be free again or remain enslaved. The battle was intense, but this time Israel did not fight alone. They fought with the certainty that God was with them. They fought with the fresh memory of the fallen King Eglon. They fought with the leadership of a man who had proven that the impossible was possible. The Bible records the result directly. On that day, Israel killed about 10,000 Moabites. They were all strong and valiant men. None escaped. The victory was total, absolute, definitive. Moab in the Bible always represented oppression, the seemingly invincible enemy. But on that day, Moab was broken, and the land of Israel had peace for 80 years. 80 years. An entire generation grew up without knowing the slavery their parents endured. This was not merely a military victory. It was a clear manifestation of divine justice in the Old Testament. God had not forgotten his people. He heard their cry. He prepared the deliverer. He executed the plan, and Israel was free. But here's what makes this story even more powerful. It wasn't a professional army that won. It wasn't a powerful king. It wasn't a famous general. It was an ordinary man with a limitation who obeyed God and changed the history of a nation. And this brings us to the legacy that Ehud left behind, a legacy that still speaks to us today. Ehud entered the list of judges in the Old Testament, not as a footnote, not as a passing mention, but as one of the liberators of Israel, a man whom God used in an extraordinary way. His story teaches us something profound about how God works. He doesn't seek perfection. He seeks availability. He doesn't seek human advantages. He transforms disadvantages into divine strategies. Ehud was left-handed. The world saw this as a limitation. God saw it as an opportunity. Ehud had no army. God gave him courage and strategy. Ehud stood alone before the most feared king, but God was with him, and that was enough. How many times have we looked at our own lives and thought, I don't have what it takes? How many times have we felt unqualified because of something that makes us different? Ehud's story screams at us. God uses exactly what you think disqualifies you. He chose a shepherd to deliver Israel from Egypt. He chose a young man with a sling to defeat a giant. He chose fishermen to change the world with the gospel. And he chose a left-handed man, considered unlikely, to overthrow a king and liberate a nation. Ehud's legacy is not just historical, it's personal. It's for you who are listening now and thinking that God can't use you. It's for you who look at your limitations and forget God's power. It's for you who need to remember that the God who chose Ehud is the same God who chose you. And here's the detail I promised at the beginning. The word Ehud in Hebrew means the one who is praised, or the one to whom confession is made. Isn't that incredible? A man with a name that means praise became the instrument of the greatest liberation of his generation. His entire life was a confession of God's power. So what do we do with this story? How does the story of Ehud, the assassin chosen by God, connect to our lives today? First, stop looking at your limitations as disqualifications. God isn't looking for perfect people. He's looking for available people. Whether you're left-handed, right-handed, tall, short, shy, extroverted, it doesn't matter. What matters is, are you willing to be used by God? Second, understand that obeying God sometimes means doing things that seem impossible. Ehud entered the enemy's palace with a hidden sword and a suicidal mission, but he trusted, and God guided him through every step. What is the impossible mission that God is calling you to do? Don't give up before you begin. Third, your moment of liberation may be closer than you imagine. Israel suffered for 18 years. It seemed like it would never change. But God was silently preparing Ehud, and when the moment arrived, everything changed rapidly. Keep crying out. Keep trusting. Your Ehud, your liberation, may be on its way. Now I want to know from you, which part of this story impacted your heart the most? Was it Ehud's courage? Was it God's strategic plan? Was it the transformation of a limitation into a secret weapon? Write it in the comments below. If this story strengthened your faith, share it with someone who needs to hear that God uses unlikely heroes. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more Bible stories that will transform your view of God and yourself. Remember, you don't need to be perfect. You need to be obedient. You don't need to have all the resources. You need to have faith in the God who provides. And above all, remember Paul's words in 2 Corinthians 12:9, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." God bless you, and may the story of Ehud, the biblical warrior who changed a nation, inspire you to live with courage, faith, and total obedience to God's calling for your life. Until the next video,